you, brother? How you living?
I'm living. If you ain't busy living, I get busy dying, and I'm still busy living, so that's good. I'm busy. I'm headed back to the front this weekend. We just got back from the front like 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I was in Pencroft City, which is of course a major hot point right now. It was very hard to get in there. It was even harder to get out. We had like 5 failed evacuations. And it's bad there, but I got a lot of really good footage, and I'm excited to share it with people, show people what's going on at the ground there, because yeah, it's bad there. But I'm staying busy, and I'm happy with that. I'm staying busy.
So I wanted to ask actually, the my little brother, God bless him, stupid asshole. And he was like, "Oh, the Russians, they're on the verge of breaking through. They're about to do this, they're about to do that." But I've been hearing that for like 3 years. So it's hard for me to take that. However, I'm also under the impression that the Trump admin has been screwing over Ukraine. So I don't know what's real and what's not. So what's the feeling on the ground? How's the logistics? Like how are, the actual people who are living and dying in the trenches, how are they feeling?
Oh, well, those are a few different questions. Well, I'll start with your brother. Um, there's not like a imminent frontline collapse. Well, there's always like a threat of there being some rotation that goes wrong that expands into a wider breakthrough, and there's been examples of this happening. None of those have ever evolved into the frontline collapse that has underpinned a lot of Russia's offensive military doctrine. Or this is this idea that if where you could like concentrate your offensive efforts in like one location, that is an idea. But another thing you could do is just concentrate your offensive efforts everywhere, and so eventually somewhere has to break, right? But what that has led to is a lot of high casualties. That has led to territory being taken. But I would describe the front line right now as sagging, right? If you look at different parts of the front, you'll see movements that are threatening the logistics of some cities like Pokrovsk on the east side. I see a lot of sagging right now that I do think is quite concerning. But none of this is the imminent, the war's end is nigh. It's all stacking upon previous Russian advances at roughly a similar pace than you could have expected. Honestly, Russian offensive operations were getting a lot more steam uh, in the middle to late last year before they were halted outside of Pokrovsk. I mean, my filming in Pokrovsk was the end of a documentary all about the battle for the city, right? So I'm trying to learn the most about this area. And when Soldovi fell, after Avdiivka fell, this is when the most territory was being taken. That's actually relatively slowed down. Now, with a lack of new American aid packages, the idea of like new wide scale Ukrainian counteroffensives or a lot of recruitment with people into like decent gear instead of having to ride into Pokrovsk, as I did on the back of a pickup truck, um, that's going to be a problem. I think I'm certainly scared about 155 artillery production because we take all this money to invest in expanding artillery production to service the Ukrainians with 155 artillery shells. We even included in aid packages for Ukraine. We designated as aid to Ukraine our own military expansions. And if we don't send those shells, well, European shell production cannot really make up the difference. That's not to say that that's an end all be all, because the Russians are also firing less shells than before. They're relying on like 40 to 50% of their shells are from like North Korea. That's not a hard number, but we're saying like roughly in that range. So they're sagging. It's going to affect the front line. I think it also emboldens the Russians, which I think drags out the war. But I don't think there is like a threat of imminent collapse. I think there's a threat to the city of Pokrovsk. I think there's a threat of a new offensive into Sumy, and threats against like Bilopila and a lot of these other small villages on the border. But like the larger goals Russia's aiming for example, capturing Kherson, capturing Zaporizhia, or still capturing Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, they're still a long way off from that. But of course, for communities like Pokrovsk, hell's on their doorstep. It was at a pre-war population of 46,000. When I was there, if there's 1,000 people left in the city, I'm surprised. They're all hiding underground, barely ever coming up above. Most of them are elderly. And it is bad enough to the point where people are getting buried in their front yards, and we took some pictures of some of these shallow graves because it just isn't worth it to evacuate the bodies and make the truck that much heavier and that much slower when driving out people who are still with us. So it's pretty bad in these frontline towns. Their morale is very difficult, especially with the constant Russian drone presence that like patrols the streets and the grad strikes and the glide bombs that'll make the whole building collapse down on top of you. But that doesn't mean or translate into a frontline collapse. The morale is low, but it's been low also for a while. I wouldn't say it's any necessarily lower than it was when we had the same than like I don't know 6 or 5 or 7 months ago.
Well, so then that kind of begs a follow-up question. A lot. What my problem is, it's easy to support Ukraine from Twitter, right? It's like I support Ukraine. Tweet, send, boom. I did my job, right?
Mhm.
But the actual thing about it is what's happening is the infantry are who fight and die. They're the people who are in the trenches actually doing the fighting and the dying. And then not just that, like you said, it seems like we're undergoing a drone revolution in warfare, which I
Yeah.
already thought the opening years of the conflict were already we were seeing like the revolution of drone warfare. The truth is that it's been taken to an even more extreme level that I
Oh,
didn't
you
even
ain't
know was
seen nothing
possible.
yet. You ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, within the past year, not only with the airstrikes from the trucks that just happened within the past couple of days, but also entire fields being covered in fiber optic wire because it's more
I
difficult,
keep
or
saying I
my
was in
understanding.
Pocrovsk and I kept these fucking fiber optics are annoying, but it's hard to see. I keep catching it with my mouth while I'm walking like under trees. God, it sucks. I keep describing
Yeah.
it like this. People keep saying spider webs or whatever. The way I see it is the world's worst fisherman came to Pokrovsk and he just couldn't catch shit. And he just kept trying to cast and he
He's just
just
walking
nothing.
into his lines over and
Yeah,
over
it's just
again.
over and over again.
Well, so that, but I mean that's the thing is with the fiber optic, I'm a war on terror veteran, right?
Hmm.
And so we had tech jumps in the war on terror, and what happened was the Iraqi army, they took all the artillery shells home. Well, they didn't have the equipment to fire the artillery shells, so they just turned them into improvised explosive devices. Well, they were using cell phones and radios and all that kind of stuff. Well, the United States military started developing cell phone and radio jammers. So then they started doing, well, they were doing daisy chains the entire time, but they would set up bombs along the entire roadway. That way, they could still set off outside of the jammer range. They could still set off the bomb. Okay, well, we got better jammers and we got different kinds of jammers. And then eventually, what ended up happening was our jamming tech was so good and the MRAPs were so good, which had a V shaped hull, so if an explosive goes off underneath the vehicle is lifted and it's shaped like a V. So the explosives get directed to either side. And then the crew cab is actually designed to separate from the engine. So the engine doesn't get jammed into the crew compartment.
That's
And
a
so that
lot better than
reduced
a
it.
pickup truck.
I believe it. And so this was an incredible amount of treasure and an incredible amount of technological development, probably within 5 years. We invaded in 2003. I deployed in 2007, and this technology was getting rolled out. Well, the one thing that we couldn't defeat was EFPs, which is explosively formed projectiles. Basically, copper. It's like a paint can filled with explosives with copper at the end of it, and when the paint can goes off, it liquefies the copper and it forms a jet and it shoots it into the side of vehicles. Well, it could penetrate anything we had, but it could only kill one or two people inside the vehicle. So eventually the American military just says, fuck it. And we just, it is what it is. Right. So that was kind of the tech development in the Iraq theater. And that's the thing is I'm seeing a crazy tech development out of the Ukrainian theater where going from radio, cell, Wi-Fi, internet. I don't even know how they, guide these drones, right? And then shifting to fiber optic, getting bigger stuff instead of using agricultural drones with thermite. There's all sorts of crazy creative shit that's happening in the Ukrainian front.
Yeah, they call those dragon drones, which I always thought was a good name for them.
The thermite agricultural drones.
You saw the ones that like spit fire, basically the thermite down on the position.
Yeah, they burn entire tree lines to get infantry to freak the fuck out and run away.
Yeah, it does. I don't know how much it really is effective in like kill. I mean, every once in a while, I'll get somebody. I think it's the main threat's actually setting off explosives and the secondary explosion the most soldier, because like a little piece of thermite getting on your arm is gonna suck, but you'd have to really get showered with it if it's got a 200 or 300 you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think the thermite there is necessarily to kill people, more to burn tree lines, get people to panic, and then, like you said, if you hit like a weapons cache, then maybe you set the weapons cache off, and then boom, maybe you kill one or two people, but also they have less weapons to throw at you.
So
So yeah, I mean
the
that's
big developments I would tell you to look out for, number one is going to
mhm,
be distance. These FPVs are going further and further and further. And while obviously with Operation Spiderweb, it shows like you can also preset. You could send them in other ways and have them go off that way. But the truck is just one delivery option. Another delivery option is you have a very big drone, like a mothership drone, that carries a lot of smaller drones, like 12 or 16, goes out 10, 20, 30 kilometers as far as it can. Then it drops those off and they all deploy and go to their preordained positions and then strike. I remember I was coming back from the Pokrovsk axis on a road outside of Dobropila, which is a village behind Pokrovsk. And as we were going down, like 2 hours after we went down a road, a Russian FPV broke a record and actually hit that road that was way like tens of kilometers away. Should not be an FPV distance. Now it's an FPV distance, and a lot of vehicles actually getting burnt on that road. So distance is one thing that people need to look out for, and the other is just AI integration. AI is already integrated into the weapons. What they do,
mm,
and mostly AI, and how it helps in most of these missions, is let's say you have an FPV and you're going towards someone and they have a jammer, which everybody has jammers now. If you don't have jammers, you're dead. I have a jammer. Everybody has to have a jammer. If you don't have a jammer, well, not a jammer, I'm sorry, drone detector. The drone detector to like detect drones so you can hide. And if you don't have a drone detector, or if you do have a drone detector, you still want a jammer. I don't have that, but I have a drone detector, so I at least know how to hide. But in that last second, when you're going to like make impact, if the jammer takes out the drone, the AI will trigger and it'll try to identify what looks like a person or what looks like a vehicle, and it will ram for the last 3 to 4 seconds of targeting assistance. That is the only
mhm.
way that I know that's been effective in the integration of AI in the use of these drones. But the inevitable like end conclusion that everybody's looking at is them pre like loading where it needs to go, patrolling around on its own and hitting its own targets, identifying the targets on its own. I think we're still a long way from that. I don't know if we will see that in this war, but that is where everybody is trying to race towards. I think it might be sooner, like it gets to position and the AI triggers and it tries to identify for the pilots what looks like movement, what looks like people, and it goes like puts box over what could be a person hiding in the bush or something like that. But AI integration is going to only continue to increase.
What's so funny about all of these tech developments, social developments, all that kind of stuff was when Call of Duty Black Ops 2 got released. It got released in like the early tens. And this was before ISIS. And I just thought to
Are you
myself,
talking about the
well, the
bridge
United
mission?
States, yeah, they had the drone swarms on the bridge mission for sure. But I was talking about it in general because even with the trailer, they showed like terrorists, like jihadists, just out in the open making speeches and shit. And I was like, this would never happen. We have MQ-9 Reapers. We got, this crazy stuff. And then ISIS happened. And I was like, okay, I was wrong on that. But I was like, okay, well, all those like drone swarms, we still don't have those yet. And then now, a decade later, we have drone swarms. Now, are they as like high tech and sophisticated and nanite as the video game? No, but are they going to get there in the next 5 to 10 years? Probably. And so that's the crazy thing about Black Ops 2 is looking about it, they weren't wrong. They were just early. And so that's where I would say that my imagination was lacking about what the future of warfare would look like. Even 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to predict what's going on right now.
I mean, it's really changed everything. Yeah, I don't know if Ukraine could have really held in the way it has if it wasn't for the drones really throwing a big wrench in modern mechanized mass assault warfare. It really has made it so I mean, it's changed the face of warfare forever, and it's only going to continue to change the face of warfare. And when I hear some people complaining about this attack, and I think we might get into it in a bit. And this is, and we're gonna, and I need to talk to you because we need a total and complete shutdown of Vet Bros, man, until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going
No,
on. Okay,
no,
we need a total and complete
I hate to agree
shutdown.
with you. Yeah. No, you can hit it. But one of the things that actually pisses me off, I like the fat electrician. I like the unsubscribed podcast guys. But they'll just say some of the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life, and they'll say it with complete confidence, and all of their audience will be like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about, man?" And that happens with vet bros for sure. They think that because they were in the war on terror, they're geopolitical experts and also military industrial complex experts.
And more importantly, warfare experts. That therefore their
Yeah.
military experience from one war, Afghanistan or Iraq, somehow applies to the biggest interstate conflict in the 21st century, happening smack dab in the heart of Europe. That's like half fucking cyber 2077. It's like these drones. The face of this war is completely different. I told the story earlier. Oh God, I was gonna get into my critique, but I'll tell the story again because I think you might find something funny out of the story.
No, go for it.
There was a lot of like U.S. veterans that came at the start, or say a lot. There was some U.S. veterans that came at the start, and of course, being a veteran with military experience is a lot more useful than you just being like some dude who got radicalized by Slava Ukraini. I want to go fight the Russians, and so these guys go out there with these units, and at the start, it's kind of a mess. A lot of it's pretty unorganized on both sides, to be completely honest. And anyway, they're fighting. And at one point, this one of these vets, and I forget, I think it might have been Spaghetti Cossack who told me this story secondhand, but one of these like U.S. veterans are in a trench with the Ukrainians, and they just start getting slammed by artillery, by mortars, by everything you can imagine. And eventually, the dude turns one of the Ukrainians. He's like, "God, we need to call in air support on that tree line." And the Ukrainians just laugh in his face, just laugh in his face. They just couldn't stop laughing, and it's because they just don't realize, number one, the position that the Ukrainians are in and how they have to fight the war, but also just what this war is when it comes to drone warfare, mass infantry assaults, etc. XYZ. Now,
Dude,
Mhm.
sorry, if I could just hit that point before we move to the next one. There's this great book called A Million Steps by Bing West, and it's in Afghanistan, and it's about the ambushes of I forget who it was, but it was some competent insurgent group affiliated with the Taliban. And what happens is, I was trained very similarly to the way these Marines were trained. The first time the Marines trained and they go out on patrol, they assault into the ambush. So they get hit with an ambush and they basically turn at 90 degrees and they charge into the enemy. Well, what the Afghans did, what the Taliban insurgents did, is they just set up mines between them and the Marines. And so the Marines are effectively charging into a minefield and they get blown up and they get chewed up by small arms fire and they lose effectively half a squad, right? Yeah, they lose like almost a full squad actually. And so what they end up doing is they're like, okay, we can't do that again. So what the Marines decide, because we are pretty stupid, but luckily we learn very quick, is they start sweeping with mine equipment. So they get snipers, they sweep with mine equipment, and then they also have permanent air cover. And so as a result of this, what they can do is the drones can effectively like call out potential ambush sites. As soon as they take fire, they have snipers who take out the people who are giving them fire. They sweep to that location and then they can always call in air. And so as a result, they're able to ultimately defeat these guys. But when you read it, what you realize is that toe to toe infantry engagements, there's not really that. Maybe I'm talking a little bit of shit, but it doesn't seem like there's really that much of a difference between American infantry and enemy infantry. What's actually different between American infantry and enemy infantry is combined arms warfare, the capacity to use snipers, the capacity to use grenade launchers, the capacity to use mortars, artillery, airstrikes, all that kind of stuff. And so when you're talking about the Ukrainians, to the point of your story, I feel bad for the Ukrainians because American military can effectively make any part of the battlefield disappear via airstrike whenever they want to. And that's obviously not a luxury
Grid
that
deletion.
Ukrainians are. Yeah. Actually, you could just be like,
That's
"Oh,
what they did in
we
the
think it's
Gulf War.
coming
They
from
were
that
just like
building over
delete that
there."
grid, delete that grid.
Yeah, put 3 JDAMs in that building, and we'll wait 20 minutes, and then boom, that building's gone. That's a huge convenience for the United States military that I actually feel bad the Ukrainians don't have.
So I wanted to talk about a few things. I also feel bad that they don't have it. It'd probably be
Yeah,
make it easier for me. But there were some critiques of this operation, and I want to get before we get into like the veteran discourse. I just wanted to talk. I wonder if your take on
good.
this critique. It was so shallow, in my opinion, where people are saying that Ukraine doing this has changed the face of 21st century warfare in such a
Yep.
significant way through the operation, Operation Spiderweb, by having these drones loaded to next to these major air bases. How this is going to endanger air bases all around the world, extremely expensive military infrastructure where all you need is $1,000 drone. It can take things out that are could be billions of dollars worth of military equipment, and they're critiquing it as if Ukraine could have changed that pathway, as if Ukraine seeing all the puzzle pieces and putting it together is their fault because those are the puzzle pieces. And it wouldn't just be the Chinese or the Russians or the Pakistanis or somebody else using the same puzzle pieces to do it 2 years from now.
These puzzle pieces were already there. For instance, I think there was the Saudi Arabian drone swarm attack that happened a few years back, like 2 or 3 years back. So I agree with you that these puzzle pieces were already there. Ukraine has done the most bold and visible translation of this new dynamic in warfare, but I don't think that's their fault. It's the same thing with British sappers in World War One. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but British engineers, they ignored trenches. What they did is they tunneled into the enemy trench. They
Mhm.
waited until they were 10 yards away, filled it with explosives, and then blew up the enemy trench before they did a charge. And people were like, oh, this is unfair. And the Brits were like, who gives a shit? This
The
is war, you
shotgun was
fucking
considered
idiot.
unfair by the Germans too.
Right.
Where's the
Yeah. So,
shotgun
dude,
today? Are those banned around the world?
well, and that's kind of I'm sorry that I'm agreeing with you so passionately, but I disagree with these people who are making all these calls of like, oh, Ukraine shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. It's like, well, just wait until your country gets bombed and see what you're willing to do to save your fucking country, right? It's probably going to be almost anything, and blowing up enemy bombers that are being used to bomb your civilian infrastructure. That's going to be a no brainer. Uh,
Mm.
for
That's
me,
a
the Ukrainians
gimme.
did nothing
That's
wrong.
a gimme.
Yeah. Well,
And,
and not just that.
mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. Continue.
Well, all I was going to say is the Americans are preparing for this, okay? The military industrial complex is preparing for this. Just by half-ass paying attention to YouTube videos about military tech over the past few months, I bumped into a video about base defense that was talking about artificial intelligence feeding live stream body cameras, anti-drone jammers, targeted anti-drone jammers, and lasers all operating off of the same system. And lasers are also going to be a huge part of the next century of warfare, where, at least according to some of the people that I've talked to, you can't see it, but it can blow your fucking head off. Like, that's how powerful some of these lasers are. So they will be, and it's very cheap as well. I keep hearing all the laser people talking about how cheap it is. Like, missiles can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per missile. A laser beam can cost 5 cents per, shot.
Yeah, I wonder about the lasers too. I haven't really seen anything of that like here so far. Um I did
It's
want
mostly the U.S. destroyer. I think that's going to be a U.S. technological advantage for at least the next 5 to 10 years. Then it'll be a thing.
I did want to touch on the bombers for a second because another critique that I saw, and this was something that was talked about by some people. I know Steve Bannon got pretty angry, and other people got angry. Is that it's not that the Ukraine? I mean, some people said Steve Bannon was angry that it was so far into Ukraine, as if he didn't know that they've already been sending long range drones and such. But people were suspicious about, well, these are nuclear triad bombers. These are bombers that could take an atomic weapon and delivering it. And when you screw with the nation's, nuclear bombers, you're screwing with such essential parts of their state security that you don't know what could happen from that XYZ. What do you say to something like that? If someone was to tell you, like, look, it's one thing for them to take out a MiG. It's another thing to target the thing that they use to underpin their atomic security
Are they using these strategic bombers and operations in Ukraine?
all the time. since
then
day
it's fair
one.
game.
That's
Then it's
why
fair game.
they brought it upon
And
themselves.
not
If they wanted to
and
make a deal with the Ukrainians and say, look, we'll not use them anymore. Stop blowing them up. You don't think the Ukrainians would agree to that? If they made a like
yeah, they
atomic
would
infrastructure
because
ceasefire, of course they would.
dude, if you can deny the enemy strategic bombing, I mean, when I say strategic, what I mean for the layperson or whatever is that there's like different kinds of bombing. There's like close air support bombing. There's pinpoint bombing. There's drone bombing. Although I guess it's technically missiles. But then obviously with strategic, typically what you're thinking about is you're thinking about the entire theater. And so with strategic bombing, we did that in World War II. We did that in Vietnam. We did that in Korea. And the whole point of that is to basically deny use to the enemy of certain areas. And so oftentimes quote unquote strategic bombing is not very precise. Like the bombing of Cambodia and Laos. And so if they're using strategic bombers to drop vast amounts of unguided ordnance onto Ukrainian civilian populations, then fuck them.
I mean,
Fuck them.
it's not even like if they use any bomber to do anything in Ukraine, it's on the table. You've introduced a
Then it's on
military
the
resource.
table.
They could be dropping like propaganda leaflets. It doesn't matter. It's now on the table. You're using it in this way. If they want to have a ceasefire on that type of infrastructure, then and these types of devices, then they can not use them. I mean, Ukraine didn't target their missile silos. Ukraine didn't try
Right.
to find one of their submarines out at sea with atomic weapons and try to sink it.
Russia should still have plenty of tools on in their toolbox.
Yeah, they can
That
still if they
I
want
don't
to
think
blow
this
up
is
the
a real
world, I'm
complaint.
sure the Russians will find a way.
No, dude, I think that you know as well as I do, although I guess it feels refreshing to talk to somebody who will agree with me. There are paid and unpaid Russian shills in the West. And the paid
Everywhere.
ones, yeah, the paid ones are taking a few $1,000 from various Russian media orgs in order to
Or a
just
few
parrot
hundred
Russian
thousand
talking
ones,
points.
as we saw from Tenet.
Yeah, and then there's contrarians who are just interested in riding the contrarian wave, and so they're not getting paid. They're just being Russian simps because it's an edgy position to have in the West, and I have no respect for either one of them.
Or they're Russian style fascists. They want what Russia has here because of some either like hardcore Christian nationalist, or they think that they're going to fight for the white man, as the Russians are currently killing the most white people of any country in the world, or some
And I also think they I forget what it is, but Russians have like a shocking amount of various ethnicities who are like in the East and in Chechnya and all that kind of stuff. It's actually like a more
Oh yeah,
multi-ethnic
Russia's going to be like
polity.
1/3 Muslim by like 2035, 2040.
And that's what I was going to say too, is that like a shocking amount of their population is Muslim as well. So this isn't your bad your based trad not neocon based trad con Christian nationalist utopia. And if it was, I would expect all these people to move there, but they never do.
No, they don't. And the ones that do, I have seen some cases. Most of them want to get out because they can't access their finances there. They're not getting much help, and just trying to learn Russian from scratch actually can be quite difficult. Um,
My
mhm.
My favorite part about the tenant media thing was when Tucker did a simping segment for a Russian grocery store, and the
Oh
tenant
yeah.
people got that segment pushed out to them, and they were like, they actually pushed back on whoever like Lauren Chen's handler was, and they were like, "Hey, this is like a little bit too obvious. We're gonna get caught with this one."
It was. And what the worst part about that Tucker Carlson segment is the bread, he's sniffing bread through plastic. You can't sniff the bread through the plastic, you fucking moron. But number
Right.
two, it's the worst bread in the store. I've seen that type of bread. It's also in Ukrainian store. He literally found the most dog ass, shit ass bread and just pretended it
He's like,
was heaven
"Oh,
on earth.
smells like freedom." God,
Smells like
Tucker's such a
freedom.
he's such a fucking piece of shit, dude. Like, I could probably still DM him. I don't know what he's doing these days, but Scooter Downey was kind of like a hardcore dissident right wing person who was working with Lauren Southern, but then got hired as one of Tucker's like research and writing guys or whatever. And I could probably still DM Scooter, but like, I kind of want to ask him sometimes and be like, dude, what? How could you like hang out with a guy who's so obviously Tucker is either self-deluding or a liar, and either way should not be taken as seriously as he is. And it's wildly frustrating that he is.
So let's move on to the vet bro crisis, okay? Let's move on to the real
Sure.
controversy here. Let's make some trouble for each other. So Let me just start off the bat. That I was raised by a U.S. Marine who fought in Nam. Okay, I am not going to come here and burn no flags. Okay, I'm saying this as
What?
somebody who wants the troops to have a good VA, want them to have good pensions when they get out, and all go home happy and healthy with their families and defend freedom, hurrah, whatever.
But
But there is a epidemic of stupid knuckle dragging, doorknob sucking, window licking vet bros that either they have podcasts or they have big social media followings, and they take their very isolated experience from the war on terror, or maybe you'll find every once in a while like Kosovo or something, but usually the war on terror, and they'll try to
mhm.
explain that experience onto every single fucking war on the planet. And they think because they picked up a gun and went somewhere that now they know everything about warfare. They know everything about it from a commander's perspective. They know everything about it from a general's perspective. And they can sit there. And I'm telling you, the worst feeling in the world. I don't know if you saw this scene from it's a very famous war movie. I'm trying to remember it. It's I think All Quiet on
Born
the
on the
Western.
4th of July,
I think
Full Metal Jacket?
All Quiet on the Western Front, right?
Yeah.
And in the original movie, there's a scene. I don't know if it's in the new one, but it's definitely in the original one where he goes back home and he's very disillusioned with society. Because of like how they're talking about the war versus what he saw. And he sits at this table with a bunch of people as they pull out this map and say the troops will march here and then the troops will march here, and he's just looking at them and he just sees how disconnected they are from it. And when I see these vet bros talk about the war, that's the experience I get every single time,
Sure.
where they're standing there
Well, they
playing like Generalissimo, like they could figure out
yeah,
how the war
they're
would either
playing
be won
Warhammer
or
40K with other people's lives in their brains, 100%. And not just that, what's funny is when they were infantrymen, they had the same complaints that nobody knew what the fuck was going on. They didn't know their ass from their elbow, and they were asking them to do impossible shit. And so, yeah, dude, not only do I sympathize, but the Monday morning quarterbacking is 100% a thing. Now, here's the thing, though. I think that Monday morning quarterbacking can be valuable, where you can take insights from different conflicts, add them to new conflicts, all that kind of stuff. I take information from all over. However, I do find it wild that trigger pullers, because within the military and the veteran community, there is an experiential hierarchy. Okay, so at the bottom of the experiential hierarchy is going to be civilians, then it's going to be persons other than grunt, then it's going to be infantry, then it's going to be special forces, and then on that hierarchy is going to be a second hierarchy of did you deploy, so did you ever do your job overseas, and then that kind of bumps you in the hierarchy, and then also did you ever kill anyone or have anyone around you die, and then that bumps you in the experiential hierarchy. And so within that experiential hierarchy, people like Sean Ryan, I'll just say his name, Sean Ryan are going to be at the peak because they're Navy SEALs, they're trigger pullers, they served during the War on Terror. Jocko Willink would be another peak guy. I'm trying to think of some other people, but like Ted Kennedy, all that kind of stuff. But what ends up happening is Special Forces is obviously like a higher breed of people. But oftentimes, what these guys are good at is they're good at kicking in a door, charging through, working with other people to charge through that door, shooting whatever is on the other side of that door, and then moving into the next room ad nauseum. That's oftentimes what these guys are very, very, very good at. But that doesn't mean that they know history. That doesn't mean that they know geopolitics. That doesn't mean that they know technology. That doesn't mean that they know diplomacy. That
or
doesn't mean
strategy.
that they know strategy.
Yeah.
They don't know any of that shit. They're really, really, really good infantrymen, but that doesn't necessarily translate into anything else.
It also doesn't translate into necessarily a connected a system of values. And I know this is something that's very
Mhm.
hard for me to accept, because you would think that if you're all standing in the trench fighting for supposedly the same thing, that you would have some like you would have some connections and through line between all of you, like what you're fighting for or what you believe in. And that's not to say that I expect everybody in the trench to be like happy Pride Month, Dylan. That's not what I'm saying, right? But but I would expect certain things like a nation's sovereignty. I would expect certain things like fundamental freedoms and things that are like born into the blood of the lifeblood of the United States would be fundamental principles that you would have to believe if you're going to pick up a
There
rifle and you're going to swear allegiance to that piece of paper.
But they're all cynics, and this is part of the poison, in my opinion, of the MAGA movement and the right wing as it presently exists. Is they don't believe in international American hegemony. They don't believe in mixed economy capitalism. They don't believe in liberty or liberalism with a capital L, like liberal republics. What the narrative that I've heard multiple times from these vet bros on their own shows is that they think that the oligarchs, the upper class, lied to them about 9/11, 2001 in order to get them to invade Iraq, which was the bigger theater, to kill people in Iraq for oil. Then their friends died for what was ultimately just losing Iraq and losing Afghanistan. And then the rich people just kept on printing money for themselves. And so that's why they're so cynical about freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, sovereignty, American hegemony. It's because they view the war on terror in their service in particular, even if they were killing bad guys, even if they were serving with some of the best people on the planet, they view the war on terror as a lie.
I can understand that. I think this is, but there's a difference between like, because this is the conclusion that you would have to jump to is, wow, that war was fought for a bunch of reasons originally stated that were not true, like the weapons of mass destruction. It wasn't, oh, they had some chemical weapons stored. That's not what was being suggested by Vice President Dick Cheney. He said
Bush was saying
we
they
don't
had like they were trying to get nukes and shit. Yeah.
they had a nuclear program once. And I'm not even completely, I'm saying this as a lefty might be dangerous. I'm not even completely blaming the Bush administration for all of the aspects, even though I think they get 80% of the blame. A certain section has to go for Saddam purposely trying to leave it vague on whether he has atomic weapons, to the point where his own cabinet's asking him at the start of the war, like, do we have nukes? They're like, do we? I
He
actually
said no. Saddam, in his own interview, number one, he thought that the United States was playing the same game that they had through the 1990s. And number two, he said himself that he didn't want to have 100% proof positive that he didn't have a WMD program because he was worried about Syrian or Iranian invasion.
this cynicism that comes from that failure, though, I mean, how do they not just process it that they have basically Vietnam syndrome themselves, that they have accepted that they're just, this is Iraq syndrome now, and now we're going to
Because
we're going to sorry, continue. You have a thought.
No, all I was going to say was because MAGA is encouraging them to be isolationist. MAGA is saying that all of everything's a lie. It's a post-truth it's a post-truth world, and then they'll bring up things that I don't even know are verifiable, or even if I could verify it. But they'll bring up things like, it, I'm not saying this is true. I'm saying this is something that I heard. Right?
Hmm.
Uh, Zelensky's wife spent, $1 billion on a Chanel purse and a Maserati, right? I'm not saying that that's true,
It isn't, by
but
the
they
way.
say
I've heard
shit.
it, but I've seen it. It's not true.
But they say that kind of shit because what they think is that the globalists want to bring Ukraine into the global economic orbit of the American hegemony, which isn't America, let's face it. It's either globalists where you're being serious, you literally mean people who don't believe in nation states, or if you're a real cynic, then you mean the Jews. And so we're dragging Ukraine into this global economic empire for our own benefit. The oligarchs in Ukraine are selling out the soldiers in Ukraine the way that America sold out her own soldiers. And therefore, it's actually in their best interest, effectively, to surrender. That's their. I swear to God, that's their perspective. And then if you're like, well, are you saying that Ukrainians who are fighting for Ukraine should just surrender? Then they're like, no, 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 no. Like it's cool that they're fighting for themselves, but I just think it's so evil and corrupt that you got to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's the argumentation.
It feels as if that they have been so scarred by their experience that, the scar went across both their eyes, and now they're blind and they refuse to see. So when it comes to the Russians, for example, like, it'd be one thing if this was like, for example, this is something that Hassan believes, this is something that a bunch of people believe, that there was this opportunity at the very start of the war that we could have pressed this button with the Russians, we could have had peace if we just accepted this much better deal, and now we're in a much worse place. people don't realize that in that deal, the details of the deal have been published long ago. They asked for Ukraine to get rid of its armed forces, to demilitarize. You go to any veteran and say, okay, should we demilitarize if the Chinese ask us to do so for peace? Of course not. What are you kidding? Of course we should give up. We should increase the spending, if anything, and X, Y, Z. This is logic they would never apply to themselves. And when I have these conversations with them, I mean, I feel like I'm fighting against like an avalanche, because if I tell one person like these circumstances, or I'll say like, look, the money laundering thing, I just hate to tell you, it just isn't true. Can you first off, can you define what money laundering is? That's a good place to start. And I might be able to get this one guy or this other guy, but no one can compete with this I mean, me as an individual, I cannot compete with this podcast system, especially speaking to them as a non-veteran. Like, I can say this or that story, and sometimes when I'm telling my stories to veterans, I feel kind of weird because like, yeah, I worked at a checkpoint the
No, you
whole
should,
war. You
dude.
know,
I think you should. I think you should flex your wartime bona fides a little bit more. I'll address that momentarily, but I think you're right that it's an avalanche of misinformation. But the reason why it's functional, the reason why it works, is because MAGA, the Make America Great Again movement, is interested in isolationism. They're not interested in the American empire. The American empire, of which I am a defender and a rhetorical gladiator for its benefits, it's not popular. The reason why it's not popular is because Bush squandered the popularity of international American hegemony with the war on terror. We're not good at crowing about our accomplishments, like PEPFAR, where we provided AIDS prevention treatments for the past 20 years and have estimated to save like tens of millions of lives. So we're not good about talking about our soft power. We haven't sold this to the American people. And so being contrarian to American empire is convenient for the right wing. And then it also buys into the pre existing cynicism, like you said, of Vietnam syndrome, where even the veterans who fought in the war on terror, they themselves hate the war in which they participated. So it's kind of like this perfect storm of cynicism that Ukraine has to suffer through because of our own sins.
Yeah, it does feel like that. It really does, especially since like these were commitments that were made to Ukraine before the war on terror even happened. I mean, if this happened before
Yeah,
the
the
war on terror, I think
denuclearization.
it'd be a lot more difficult for this type of like cynicism to really take root, so to speak. But I also
I
believe.
think if we had
Mhm.
never invaded Iraq, we would have been fine. I think if we had just invaded Afghanistan, just hunted down Osama bin Laden and come home, I think we would have been
And we
fine.
did
I
the
think
John
that the
Bolton
Iraq
strategy: kick in the door, kill Osama, throw the Constitution in the air, and say peace.
Pretty much. Yeah, I think that actually would have worked out better because then we wouldn't have had to fuck with Iraq. They just would have been under sanctions, and we wouldn't have this like
I don't know.
pall
It's also hard
of
to say
hatred for
if
American
we didn't
military
divert resources
interventionism.
to Iraq, how Afghanistan would have even gone if we focused the entirety of our attention on one war instead of two wars, and if we even tried nation building, and that is, but that should have, could have, would have. I as we're talking about American hegemony, I do think fundamentally we have to offer something different. We have to offer something different than American hegemonic power. I don't think you're going to convince these people, and I don't even think you really should, that American hegemonic power across like being the most powerful country, controlling all the seas, controlling all that it's not only is likely not feasible going into the decades to come, but I don't know if it's even necessarily a good proposal. I think what you're going to have to offer these people is something more as we protect what we can. We make alliances with those who benefit us, those who share similar value systems with us, those we have deep economic, cultural, diplomatic and military ties to. We sustain our commitments to be a reputable, country on the world stage, not
I
defending
I,
everything in the
I
world, but
feel like
defending
you
what we
lack
can.
ambition. You lack ambition, young Dylan. So if you actually look at our unilateral and multilateral alignments and agreements, we are probably allied with like 70% of the world economy. I would actually venture an argument that the only people who are not a part of our nexus are effectively like Venezuela, Iran, Russia, and China. And even China is like a massive trade partner despite not being like under the American hegemony, right? Thailand still likes us, or used to, anyways. Vietnam likes us. Japan likes us. The Malaysians, the Sing, they all view us as a counterweight against China. Then when it comes to Europe, they all view us as a counterweight against Russia.
To be
And
a
then when we're talking
counterweight,
about
not a
Africa,
hegemon.
well, it depends on how you do it, because if we have open trade with those people to the point that we are both mutually benefiting from each other's markets, then I would make the argument that we don't need to we don't need to physically like control these people in order to have good trade relations and good military relations, right?
I
Like
agree.
you don't have to conquer it.
You don't need to Panama or Greenland it. Yeah.
Yeah, which again, I find to be like we could have got whatever
Which is,
Trump
by the
wants
way,
out of.
fucking bizarre that all these guys who are like, my God, I can't believe the Ukrainians XYZ and all these wars fought for nothing. And it's like, yeah, but fuck Canada. We'll conquer Canada. They're a bunch of fucking pussies. We'll conquer Greenland. Yeah, fuck what the fuck, you'll conquer this.
I
We'll
think it's
conquer that.
mostly I think it's mostly because they know that it's a joke. Although Trump doesn't seem to think that it's a joke. The but what's crazy to me about Canada, Greenland, and Panama is all of the things that Trump wants. If he wants better trade, if he wants better access to minerals, if he wants more military bases, I almost guarantee you that Panama, Greenland, and Canada would all agree to updated status of forces agreements where we're allowed to
Absolutely.
have more bases or more economic access to their minerals, and we can help them, get access to these things through technological advancement, all that kind of stuff.
Hell,
Whatever Trump's
In
wants out of
Greenland's
these
case, I don't know
places.
if you knew this, but Greenland, they're having a referendum on independence. Like, this is like a big thing in Greenland. The plan is, if they go independent, they pivot in our direction. That's the plan. And as they're having this independence debate, to possibly pivot in our direction and only our benefit from our diplomatic side, we're actively antagonizing them.
Which, yeah, so that's where, to me, Trump isn't some 5D genius. As a matter of fact, the I always like hold some level of self-skepticism where I wonder if I'm wrong about shit almost all the time. But pretty much when Trump wasn't able to secure a deal before he was elected for Ukraine and Russia, when he wasn't able to secure it within 24 hours, when he wasn't able to secure it within a matter of weeks, when he wasn't able to secure it within a matter of few months, I was like, okay, this guy actually just is a dumbass. Like he's just an unequivocal idiot that people are clinging to because they're desperate for their own power. And then when it comes to like Russia, he's just getting played. And the only hope that Ukrainians have, by the way, for the United States helping Ukraine out again, is that Putin screws over Trump and embarrasses him so much in public by not coming to the table that eventually Trump supports Ukraine out of spite against Russia. That's your best hope.
There's also, of course, the possibility that Congress could act without Trump, and they could pass veto-proof legislation. Because it puts Trump's in
Expecting
a.
anybody in Congress to have balls, I think, is an even further shot than what I
I'm
just said.
I'm I'm hearing some very interesting things right now. And I'm hearing that Mike Johnson, they
I
might
hope
have
you're
actually
right.
gotten Mike Johnson on board with the sanctions package that they're moving for, because this is something that there seems to be hunger on the hill to do something because they see that it's not working, and they don't want to tie themselves to this failed project. And so I think a lot of them really want permission for Trump. And when you listen to them talk about it, they're like, we'll work with President Trump in XYZ applying pressure to the Russians. And that's the barrier they have to get over. But if they bring that legislation to the floor, it will win. So it has to be brought to the
Okay.
floor. It will win. In that case, it's brought to the floor, and it will win with the veto proof majority. The difficulty is going to be trying to get Mike Johnson or bring that to the floor. But I'm hearing some positive things. But I'm until it happens, I'm not putting any money down on it. Okay, I'm not
Yeah,
putting a dime on it.
yeah, I'm very skeptical of anything positive happening until the midterms. I'm actually really hoping that there's a pretty big backlash against MAGA and against Trump, and then they get swamped in the midterms, and then Trump's a lame duck, and then we don't have to deal with him anymore. So I'm actually just trying to survive the next 2 years.
Because a lot of the unconstitutional actions he's taking, like if Congress has the ability to like move in there and stop, they can, if it's opposition controlled, do that. It's just right now the Republicans have no reason to hold him in line.
Well, and my cynical brain is asking because I'm thinking about the cuts to PEPFAR, man. So this is something that I bring up all the time, and everybody gets pissed off at me, but I don't know. I just feel like it's true. PEPFAR was a program that cost $6.5 billion per year. in order to provide AIDS prevention and AIDS treatment for people all over the world.
Mhm.
It's estimated that a 90-day pause of it is going to kill between 60 and 75,000 people. And it's estimated that if it stays out of service for like the next 5 years, then there's going to be 3 million excess deaths caused by the elimination of the program. And
Is
this
pa
was a
are
bipartisan.
are you sure they're not just providing trans surgeries?
No, they're not. Thank you,
Oh.
Dylan. But this program was originally started. It was bipartisan legislation that was passed under Bush. And so it's like a win-win-win across the board. And if you look at $6.5 billion, if you divide it up by 330 million Americans, bear in mind we got kids and old people and all that kind of shit. But just dividing up the cost to the taxpayer, divide 6.5 billion by 330 million, I'm pretty sure it's $18 per year. So the fact that we can't ask the American people to spend $18 per year in order to save several hundred thousand people per year to the tune of 3 million people over the course of 5 years, I can't think of anything more like negligently evil than that. And yet nobody cares because it's not whites dying in a terrorist attacks. It's black folk dying of AIDS. So nobody gives a shit.
The thing is, it's not just, it's like people think about it just like, oh, we're just giving this charity. They think that there's no benefit for us from this. There is a
Yeah.
benefit. There is of course a soft power benefit, but also on the inverse, sometimes I'll hear from people like, "Oh, don't worry, like China will take it up, or they'll find some." No, they're not finding another person. They're not finding another power to come in and drop that money down. People are dying right now. People have already died. People have already died due to the cuts. And so it's not a question of like China will eventually move in to take up some of that burden because they just are not going to let that soft power capital just like rot. They're going to take advantage of
Evaporate.
it.
Yeah.
But right now, like they've pulled back on the Belt and Road Initiative. They've started collecting money off of some of the poorest countries in the world. Like they are currently collecting the most money from developing countries. They're the largest debt collector of developing countries, $35 billion a year. So that says to me they're on the reaping stage, not necessarily still the sowing stage, right? And
Mhm.
so that means they're not going to have all the capacity to fill up all of this space, to fill up all these room, and people are going
Or
to
might
die,
not
and they
have the
already
interest
have.
because they want to because or they might not have any interest, and I was wondering about this with Democrats, because they want America to suffer the consequences of its unforced errors. Imagine, like, I'm not saying, like, I don't have any faith in political people to be smart enough to actually capitalize on issues that are urgent, because frankly, the more people I meet in politics, the more I realize that it's just run by the same morons that I've met in every industry ever. But
They're just another
the
Twitch chatter.
but why would China not just allow America to be known as the country that abandoned 3 million people to their deaths in order to save less than 1% of their budget? That's the kind of reputation
And
that doesn't
then,
wash off.
as they're saying they're going to save their budget, then put forward a big, beautiful bill that adds $3 to $5 trillion to the debt anyway.
Dude, if I cared, like I do care about hypocrisy, but if I took hypocrisy personally, I think I would have had an ulcer and burned a hole through my stomach at this point.
Your stomach is more ulcer than stomach at this point.
Yeah, it would be more ulcer than stomach, 100%. Yeah.
So let's
It's
go back
horrifying.
to the vet bro crisis. Let's get back to the vet bro
Sure.
crisis. So one of the things I talked about was this all around experts thing. We'll just touch on that again briefly. Um, I think that this is the good example that I can use. I had a talk with Aircraft Sparky. Are you familiar with this fine fellow?
I know Aircraft Sparky. I had to block him eventually. I'm actually quite fond of Aircraft Sparky. I don't know if he'll watch the spot or whatever. I'm quite fond of him, but he's obnoxious. He's obnoxious and he's rude.
Well, I had a conversation with him recently because he tweeted at me that I don't know if you saw that video of that Russian sitting in a field. He was really
Yeah.
sad, and he got hit by.
I'm sure Aircraft Sparky, I'm sure if you go onto his Twitter, it's nothing but Ukrainian civilians getting smoked by drones and executed and all that kind of stuff. He's actually really just a humanitarian who cares about all deaths,
I did
right?
ask him if he knew what the human safari is. He did not know what the human safari is, but also almost all
I'm
Americans
shocked.
don't know what the human safari is. But he told me that it was a war crime. He told me it was a war crime. He added me on Twitter and wanted to get my opinion. I just said no. I didn't expand on that. And then we go and we sit down and I want to talk to him because I know it's not a war crime. I already know that the international law dictated around drones is like extremely non-existent. And so even trying to find some legal basis to declare this a war crime would be difficult. And even if it was like a guy sitting in a field and he was hit with a sniper rifle, it still wouldn't be a war crime because he was an enemy soldier on your territory sitting in a field. And just because he wasn't doing anything doesn't mean he's not a valid target. Can you not take out a guy when he's eating a sandwich? You can't take out the enemy when it's lunchtime or when they're in their barracks sleeping. If on every front, it just didn't make sense. But this is a guy who has experience in Kosovo, two other conflicts from the war on terror, and he was applying his experience of having to be fired upon 3 times in Kosovo or wherever before engaging to the experience of a Ukrainian drone pilot.
No. And this is bullshit too. Sorry. Already this is bullshit. He said that he had to be fired on 3 times before he could fire back.
They had to take like fire like 3 times before they could fire, something like that.
Yeah, that's because his commander or his captain or whoever was in charge of him was fucking retarded. Okay. So I'm gonna explain this for your audience. Sorry for the arsler. But there's rules of engagement. All right. May indulge me your rant, please. So there's rules of engagement. And as an example, in the war on terror, when a truck was running up on your convoy in 2007, you were supposed to shoot a pen flare. Then you were supposed to hit him with a laser in the eyeballs. And then you were supposed to do warning shots with tracers to the side of the vehicle. Then you were supposed to shoot the engine block. And then you were supposed to shoot the driver. That was the escalation of force or rules of engagement in the war on terror in 2007. Okay. But do you know what's at the bottom of the rules of engagement placard every single time?
What?
Every single time. If you can reasonably articulate imminent threat of death or great bodily harm to yourself or others, you can use deadly force. Every single time. And it's this great caveat. And the reason why I have that hammered into my head is because this is the caveat that law enforcement uses all the time in order to take human life is that if you can reasonably articulate imminent threat or death or great bodily harm, then you can take life. Boom. And so while this might not apply to this gentleman in this field in particular, it still means that aircraft Sparky's rules of engagement or whatever from when he was in Kosovo, it doesn't fucking apply. He had a dumb commander who explained rules of engagement in a stupid way to him.
Well, either way, the rules of engagement of wherever he is going to be much different than the rules of engagement that are in this war. The standards,
Naturally, what is it like 2 decades? Two
yeah, it's
decades
two
of difference?
decades, totally different war, totally different technology. Like it's also you're engaging at totally different distances. When you're an infantryman firing on somebody, it's very different engagement than a drone pilot taking somebody 7 miles or something into enemy territory. And like when I hear like make this guy surrender, he's gonna be 7 miles behind the front line. You have no clue what the specific
And
circumstances
you
are.
could just wait. Yeah, and he could just wait for the drone to run out of juice and then walk back to lines and then kill the Ukrainian the next day. I've heard these arguments. I'm still, from a moral basis, I still think it rubs me wrong
Rub me
to
wrong,
kill.
but that's war.
Yeah,
The repulsion people is having is not, oh, this is the most evil. The repulsion is men killing other broken men. That's the repulsion. You're repulsed by war, and I agree with that. This shows the different. Oh God, I don't want to kill this guy. Hey, this shows the what why war is bad, and you shouldn't invade other countries. You're being repulsed by finding out what war is.
kind of. Yeah, but like that. That's the thing is. I think we all want to idealize conflict to the point that it's two armed guys going into a firefight. They both know what they're getting into, and they get into a fight. But sometimes some guy runs out of ammo. Sometimes they get killed while they're sleeping, like you mentioned, where the building just gets bombed in the middle of the night. One of the things that was sorry, just popped into my head. Uh, Believe it or not, in Central Florida, I met a survivor of the Beirut, Lebanon tower bombings, where the Marines and the Frenchmen were killed in like the 80s. And he effectively said that he was walking around in his barracks. He heard an alarm go off. He turned towards the wall. He was on like the third or fourth floor. And then he remembers the wall effectively disintegrating and flying towards his face. And then he lost consciousness. And then he was in and out of consciousness for 11 hours while buried in rubble until somebody found him and saved him. But that was what his war wasn't some sexy, heroic, perfectly valorous run towards the enemy, gunfight, changing mags like John Wick, throwing flashbangs and grenades into rooms. It wasn't that. He deployed to a country, a suicide bomber hit the building he was in, the wall that was in front of him vaporized and hit him in the skull, and then he was knocked out of war for the rest of his life. That was his war. That wasn't fair. And on top of that, like I think 200 of his fellow servicemen died. He was the lucky one. He was the one who survived. So then try to tell that man who lost 200 of his brothers and got knocked unconscious for 11 hours and lived in rubble, and that was his war. Try telling that guy that he's lucky. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, like what? Sorry, I went on this diatribe effectively to say, yeah, war's fucked up, and it's not always like the movies. Some people get the movies, some people get fucked.
Yeah, I mean, like, I remember when I was in Pokrovsk and I was underground, and the bombing was close enough that pieces of the ceiling is like falling or whatever, right? And
Mhm.
that stuff's happening. Like, if I was to go, it would be, I mean, maybe it'd be much better if it was like, any last words, Amerikansky, you know, I die for Batko Nash Svoboda, my father is freedom, and I
Freedom.
fall and when I fall, I'll fall face first to make it easier for my buddies, and you know, or whatever. But
Right.
what's much more likely is I'm going to be in the basement of one of these buildings. A glide bomb's going to hit the building. It's all going to collapse in on me, and I'm going to be made like a pancake at the bottom of a Jenga tower, and I'm not going to, and it's going to be a half second like that. That's
Yeah.
the much more likely outcome.
Dude, and I'll give you a very nice eulogy, and then the world's gonna move on, which is
Yep.
sad. Like it's horrible. When you think about how big the world is and how quickly people move on from tragedy, it's horrific. Like you've been one of my Twitch poll friends for I don't know 5 years now, 4 years, something like that. But the truth is, like, I'm not saying this because I want to hurt your feelings or hurt chat's feelings. But what's going to happen is once per year on the anniversary of your death, we're going to get together and we're going to be like, God, Dylan was such a good guy. And that's it.
And
And
then
that's going to
after
be it.
5 years, it'll just be a tweet. And then 5 years after that, no one will say anything.
Right. Right. And so that's where I admire you for pursuing your principles and all that kind of stuff. But in my opinion, you need to be getting something out of it. You know what I'm saying? Because the thing about it is, if you worry about everybody else, then everybody else, like I said, like we just said, is going to move on relatively quickly. They're going to do a stream for 2 or 3 years in your honor. They're going to drink beers. They're going to say Dylan's a good guy. They're going to tweet for another decade, and then they'll just remember you every now and then. So if you're going to voluntarily involve yourself in conflict, then you, Dylan Burns, need to be getting something out of it.
You hear that, chat? You can donate at dylanburns.tv,
Exactly.
dylanburns.tv. You can donate to the show. Make
True, true,
sure
true, true.
I got a lead coffin.
Yeah, that's worth at least a super chat. Good God. But the sorry. It's 11:07, so I probably want to dip out at 11:30.
Sure.
But
Okay.
the
Continue, and then I'll throw the last questions I got at you.
Sure. So I was just going to address the vet bro thing real quick. I think that it's difficult to check your ego. Like I don't like checking my ego. I like opining on everything on the world. But I also studied a lot of other shit besides just joining. That's actually where, on occasion, people will just call me like a mall cop online in order to piss me off because they remember the Destiny debate where Aaron Straighteraid, called me a mall cop, being a fucking bitch. Love you, Aaron. But the point is, the reason it does rub me wrong, but it doesn't rob me wrong too much, only because I actually know what I did in law enforcement. I actually know what I did in the Marine Corps. And I also know that I researched and studied plenty of things outside of that. So it doesn't bug me as much.
I wanted to talk about this drone, extend from this drone thing to say I see a lot, and I don't know why I see it specifically in the vet bro circles, but in my experience, when I was in Kherson, I'm sorry I keep talking, but I'm just relating it to what I've seen, right? In my experience in
No,
Kherson,
do
I
it.
made a full documentary on the human safari. The Russians are hunting civilians there. The evidence is everywhere. If you just stand there long enough, the evidence will come to you. Okay, you might not,
Mhm.
it might not be fun, but the evidence will come to you. right? And so that's what I see is the Russians even sometimes call it a human safari. They hunt openly, sometimes use the dogs for target practice. It's like, and they post it all on social media. And you got to think these are official accounts that are posting it. It's not like a socials, because sometimes a soldier will commit war crimes, they'll post it on their own socials. No, these are the official accounts of these units using these videos to fundraise, putting rock and roll music over them, blowing up grandmas because they see, well, they're if they're still in Kherson, they're probably one of the bad ones anyway, and they shouldn't even
Mhm.
be here, right? Because it's our fucking city, right? This is horrific. And when I go and I see what gets traction, it isn't these grandmas getting hunted. It isn't. I remember I went to the Bilopila. I spent time with the mayor a fucking few weeks ago. A civilian transport vehicle got hit, 8 people died. It was obviously a bus. They'll hit the grandmas when the ambulances come. They'll hit the ambulances when the first responders come to save them. They'll burn a house with some type of firebomb. Firefighters come to try to stop the fire from spreading and burning down half the fucking city, and they start bombing the firefighters. And then when I go online, I see that video is what will catch traction. That guy sitting in the field of the Russian, or there'll be some video where a Russian's like sitting in a field gets hit by a drone, and it's all very fucking sad. But what I'm seeing is people horrified by the horrors of war, and I'll see people retweeting stuff like that. Oh my gosh, this is why I don't support Ukraine. But there is none of this civilian slaughter that's getting served to them as why the Ukrainians are fighting so viciously to defend their lands. And it leads me to think, why is there so much Russian sad sympathy porn getting distributed amongst vet bro communities?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you. Number one, it's algorithmically primed. So I guarantee you that Elon has his thumb on the scale for effectively pro-Russian
Guarantee, you
stuff. He
say.
might he might
Guarantee, you
claim that
say.
it's neutral. What's that?
Guarantee?
I don't know if guarantee, because then Destiny will be like, "What evidence do you have that Elon Musk has put his thumb on the scale?" Blah blah blah, and I'll be like, "Because I see Russian war porn way more than I see Ukrainian murdered civilians." But anyways, so no, I don't guarantee. My instinct tells me that Elon is putting his thumbs on the scale for pro-Russian accounts. Not just that, I also think that the it's the contrarian thing, man. People don't want to trust mainline institutions. So since MSNBC, CNBC, CNN, all that, the Democrats, since they all support Ukraine, then obviously what you have to do in order to trigger the libs is you have to support Russia.
Or some
And I
of it
swear to
is like
God,
not even like it's literally they do this, they do that. So if mainstream media says Ukraine is good, and mainstream media tricked me when it comes to the war, when it comes to XYZ, therefore Ukraine is bad and therefore Russia is good. It's as simple as that. Which they
yeah,
don't realize, they're still letting mainstream media pick their opinion for them. They're just doing, they take
they're
one
just
step
picking the
forward.
opposite one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a NPC meme where they're swapping out the chips, but somebody made it so it's like the opposite of whatever the mainstream says, and then it's just the NPC in that direction. So, but this is all warfare, man. That's what was so interesting when I was talking to Lauren Southern. I retweeted a rocket attack in Ukraine where there was like a kid who had his head blown off, and it was probably like an 8-year-old boy. It actually kind of fucked me up because my boy's 7, and I retweeted it, and it's just this kid with his skull missing, and then the missile says like from Russia with love in like Russian or some shit, right? And so Lauren DMs me, God bless her. She DMs me and she's like, "Hey, that paint on the side of the missile looks really fresh. Looks like the Ukrainians might have painted that on the side of the fucking missile." And I'm just thinking to myself, like, Lauren, you have a son, right? Like, aren't you more worried about the 8-year-old who had their skull blown off the fucking, his fucking skull caved in by a random Russian missile? And she's like, "Yeah, but the Ukrainians are lying." And I'm like, "Yeah, but the Russians are fucking lying. This is psychological warfare. The armed militaries of this conflict are putting propaganda out into the world in order to gain sympathy. And I don't put a negative connotation on propaganda because propaganda is effectively biased information. Well, there's biased information for the free world, and there's biased information for the National Socialists in the Soviet Union. Guess which biased information I pick? The one that's biased for the free world. So if you want to say it's biased or not wholly accurate or whatever, you do you. We should always pursue truth. But don't come to me pissed off because Ukrainians wrote from Russia with love on the side of a missile. Come to me pissed off because there's a fucking 8-year-old who's missing his fucking brain matter because he got his fucking head caved in by a goddamn Russian missile.
It does
Like
show
what the
where her
fuck? Where's your
priorities are.
priority?
It does show where her
Where's your
priorities are.
priority?
Yeah. But also, let me just say, it would, if they did launch it, it would be freshly written, because the way that they sign shells is they signed them before being launched. I did a I can't. I've been here for too fucking long. I did a documentary about the cell shining specifically. I'm gonna by the end of this, it's gonna be documentary on the cooks behind the front line, documentary on Babushko donates $5. I'm gonna be fucking looking for anything. But I did a documentary about
Yeah.
the shell signing, and the way they do it is they will have people donate shit. Donate $100 to have their custom message written on the shell, and you can see it all the time in the West. They'll say like "fuck you, Ivan," or some combination of that. Why is it
No,
so hard
I
to
think
believe that the Russians do the same thing? And they do the same thing.
I can't remember if I actually did buy a shell or if I just showed it off on a fundraising live
SignMyShell.com, by
stream.
the
Yeah,
way, is one of the big Ukrainian versions that do it. I met the guy who runs it.
right. So, but the point is, at least in my opinion, I care more about the dead kid than I do about what's written on the side of the missile, right? And so people on social media, if they want to freak out about the Russians writing vulgar things on their missiles or their artillery shells, go fucking at it. If you want to freak out about Americans signing artillery shells that are being fired from Ukraine, go for it. I'm more concerned with the people actually dying every single day.
Yes. Do you think that, because I don't think that the high concentration is just Elon putting his finger on the scale. I have no clue if he is, but I do think, and this is a hunch, I'm saying, I'm speculating, I want to put that out there, that the Russians, while we already know that they're doing information warfare, but I wouldn't be surprised if they've specifically tried to concentrate a section of that information warfare to specifically target US veterans, to specifically target those
Oh
who have
yeah.
been burnt by the war on terror, thinking that they could go for them and make them, or at least try to capitalize on that cynicism to either turn them against their own government, turn them against their nation's causes, or turn them against, in this case, Russia's enemies in Ukraine's example.
I already know that's true. So I already know that's true, man. There's no, in my opinion, for Glenn Greenwald, for Tucker Carlson, for all those people, knowingly and unknowingly, right? Like I don't think anybody is paying Brandon Herrera, the libertarian vet guy. I don't think anybody's paying Brandon Herrera to be a contrarian and to be against Ukraine and the Ukrainian war. Nobody's paying him. What he saw contrarians like Tucker Carlson and Glenn Greenwald and all these other fucking guys they're not making pro-Russian arguments, they're making anti-Ukrainian arguments, right? And
Mhm.
so then he just started parroting those because he knew that it would play well with his fucking base. And then also the other thing that I'm looking at when it comes to bots, I don't like accusing people of botting, but the one thing that I've noticed that's made things very obvious is when you have an extreme amount of likes with no comments. That's the one thing that I have found consistently that looks like botted accounts is somebody with like 50,000 likes and 12 comments. In my opinion, that's probably a botted account.
Yeah, they do a lot of body. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll find like accounts from real people, and they'll just boost it through the roof because it's a message that aligns with their narratives.
Well, this is the challenge with free speech, Dylan, right? So the challenge with free speech is that the pro-Russian narrative is a narrative that is viable. I think it's vile. I think there's incoherent parts of it. I also think it's anti what I'm for, but that doesn't mean that it's not a part of freedom of expression, freedom of conscience. And so I think we can focus on the fact that it is information warfare. But I don't think that you win that game of information warfare by saying, oh, you stupid vet bro, you were suckered in by the Russians in order to spread Russian propaganda. I think you tell them why they're wrong about the way that they feel, not about the war on terror necessarily, but why do they want to rip this whole thing down? Why do they want to rip the United States of America down? Why do they want to rip down international hegemony? Why do they want to rip down mixed economy capitalism? Because most of these people, no offense to vet bros, but like a lot of them have VA disability. They have families, they have jobs, they have like a normal life. So why are they so interested in burning the country down? It pisses me off.
So I've gone through most of what I wanted to go through. Um, I'm just too curious. I just have to.
Sure.
You said God bless her soul. Should God
Uh-huh.
bless her soul?
No, but as a Christian, isn't, Christ all about God, blessing people that don't deserve it?
She we're pretty we have it in the review mirror now. I feel and I got 10 minutes left, so I'm gonna use it. Why is she so whiny?
Which one?
Lauren.
Lauren Southern?
Lauren Southern.
Has she been on social media recently?
Well, no, not recent. I mean, I'm thinking back to like hippy dippy days, just like anytime I interact, but not like even the debate we had that she was necessarily whiny, even though she just wanted to talk about like anonymous fucking Twitter accounts the whole time. But like on the hippy dippy experience, like
Uh-huh.
last second cancellation, oh, I didn't do the research. Then I, start doing the show. Then she graces us with the presence. And then she starts acting like, oh, I can't, like as if it was an insult that she had to make an appointment that she agreed to. And because she was lazy and didn't do the research, that's somehow fucking my fault. And then they start acting like fucking children. It's just I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just
So
why is she so whiny? That's my question
I'll
to you.
I'll give you the mean answer, and then I'll give you the friend answer.
Okay.
Okay. The mean answer is she's a diva, right? That's the mean answer. The mean answer is that whenever she walks in the room, everybody pays attention to her. They want to know her opinion. They want to talk to her. They want to impress her. All that kind of stuff. She's used to people caring about her presence and her opinion. So that's the mean answer.
And on Hippy Dippy, I'm not
The
a coddler typically, I guess.
you're not catering to her clout and prestige and intelligence and oh my god, Lauren Southern is here. Which by the way, to some degree I appreciate because I think that what kind of checks those diva instincts is when you don't feed into them. When you kind of say like I don't give a shit who you are, you're either here to debate or you're not, right? Like that is not my fucking problem, right? So I think that can check the diva instinct. So sorry, Lauren, not trying to be too rude, but sometimes you can be a diva, and I think she would agree with that actually. The nicer answer is I think that she just went through a lot that year, right? So or the 2 years before, because I think in 2020, I guess approximately, she got married to a gentleman in Australia. They got pregnant. They had their first kid. They moved back to
Both of
Canada.
them.
Uh, what's that?
Both of them got pregnant. Mazel tov.
Yes. Then they moved to Canada. He had promised to support their family through thick and thin and be willing to take a job because he knew he was going to take a hit. Because I think he worked in Australian defense. I don't know what he was. But she basically told him before they get together, like, if we get together, your career is going to take a hit because of who I am. And he said, I don't care. I love you. I want to be with you. This is according to Lauren, of course. But when they moved to Canada to be closer to her family, he basically checked out of the relationship, according to Lauren again. So he moves back to Australia, doesn't want to be with Lauren anymore. Then, of course, this is kind of like 2022. So I think the destiny thing happens sometime in the spring of 22, if I remember correctly. Bear in mind, I was not in this relationship and I'm getting all of my information secondhand. And then by the time that you and I are hanging out and debating with Lauren, I think it would be 21 or 22. Effectively, she's in the midst of divorce. She's a single mom. She's catered to a far right, dissident, white, right wing audience that has been co opted by the red
Oh
pill.
no.
The second they find out that she doesn't have like a pure Aryan, blonde haired, blue eyed baby in a perfect trad relationship, they're going to fucking eat her alive. So her base is poised to rip her to fucking shreds. And that's before she even has a relationship with Steven. So yeah, dude, like she was
Is
under a
that true, by
fuckload of
the way?
pressure.
Did she and then Steven,
I mean, that's what so I was told at the time that it was an emotional thing, not a physical thing. That's what Lauren told me. But I don't know if you saw this, but I think it was November of last year. There was I think it was November of last year. I think this came out around the same time as the Pixie leaks. I don't know if you're aware of the Pixie leaks. But basically, it was outed that their relationship was substantively more deeper than I was told,
Ah,
and probably physical.
but is that confirmed?
No idea. You ask the drama people, but I
Okay.
think the amount.
I just, it was thrown at me by Vadim recently in a conversation that had nothing to do with it. Just so, and I'm just curious, I guess,
For
slightly.
for me, I'm actually quite sympathetic to Lauren, and to a degree, I'm actually sympathetic to Steven as well. They did something dumb that they were going to pay for with that they were by having this relationship, even if it was just emotional. Let's say it wasn't physical. Even just having a very deep emotional relationship, considering how zealous and passionate their audiences are, they were going to pay a professional price for this relationship. So
Yeah,
they
that's
made a
true.
choice. They made a choice to have that relationship, and then they made a choice to break it off. And then eventually they did pay the consequences of that.
Last thing I'll ask. So she was paid
Mm.
by the Russians through subsidiary. I mean,
Yeah, but
she
I
took
don't.
Russian money. Well, let me finish it. Okay, okay. I
Uh,
understand you're at the Lawrence Southern
I was getting
Defense
my
Brigade
broom
over
out. I was
here.
like, "No, Dylan, get
You're
back! I'm gonna sweep."
he's got to sweep. Okay, but she was given a substantial sum of money from Russia's coffers through intermediaries. We don't know. I don't know if she knew. I'm sure she said she didn't know, and I remember reading articles at the time that she had no reason to question where the money was coming from. And so there's two questions attached to this, right? The first question is
Mhm.
how much money are you fucking getting from so many
How
different
much money am
sources?
I
No,
getting?
no.
Not
Let
enough.
me finish my question. How much money can Lauren Southern be getting, or any of these people involved in the scandal, that another party coming in and just dropping cash to you, you just don't fucking ask any questions? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, do you really think that she didn't know, considering like, I mean, she was pretty friendly with that Dugan fella, and this is somebody who wants
Well,
to
I
create
think that's why
internal
they got her.
divisions in the United States, who wants race war here, wrote books about it, you know?
Well, I think this is the reason why they picked her, because to my knowledge, she was not with Tennant when she did the Dugan interview. That was before the interview. I think she said, she would have to correct me if I get this wrong, but I think she met with and spoke Alexander Dugan. I think they actually have like an interview that's online that you could probably find. And then also, I think that he met his daughter who was killed in that car bombing.
Yeah, I
So
debated her
I think,
about it. I
yeah.
was very unsympathetic, and I think I made her slightly uncomfortable.
Well, and I think it's because the same way that I was empathizing with the Ukrainian child that got their skull ripped out, I think that she was empathizing with a real human being with whom she had a conversation. And that's also the thing that kind of bugs
The
me
problem
about this
is she was
conflict.
sympathized for that human being, but she was sympathized for the human being she saw, not the human being that went out and produced propaganda for a brutal war machine. And it also, I
Oh,
don't
I'm
know if
with you.
it wasn't really smart for her to use Dugan's translator for that debate with us. That was a little weird.
Well, and I think that we're all guilty of selective empathy, right? We're all guilty of it, but I think that we need to be aware of our selective empathy. What I mean by that is I have zero sympathy when a jihadist gets killed, somebody who dedicated themselves to like attacking civilians in the name of Islam, but I don't feel anything.
Connor, they
I
had a
feel
mother.
nothing, right? But I don't feel anything. And so, whereas when I see a Ukrainian soldier die, and I see, like, for instance, the guy who was smoking cigarettes who screamed out "Slava Ukraini"
Slava
as he was
Ukraini
smoking
before they
cigarettes
executed him. Yeah, they said last
before
words.
they
And yeah,
executed
yeah.
him, dude. For me, that dude's like a fucking hero. Like I have like a little like swell of like almost like empathy and pain and pride, not because like I'm that guy's friend or whatever, but I'm happy that I'm even the same species as that guy because that guy had the fucking balls to die for something he believed in, right? And so we're all guilty of selective empathy. But sorry, you asked me something about Lauren, specifically related to Tenant. So when it came to Tenant, I think we had a conversation after it dropped, and she was like, "Holy shit, I could have gotten so much more fucking money." That's like
That
Tim
was her
Pool.
take.
Yeah, because Tim Pool and Benny Johnson and Dave Rubin were getting stupid fucking checks. And I don't know, somebody correct me, but with if you look at the archive of the Tenet YouTube channel, Lauren was the only creator that was actually carrying the metrics. Like Dave Rubin would post a video to Tenet, it would get like 6K views. Lauren Southern posts a video to Tenet, it gets like 200K. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So obviously, like
So
the
what you're
goal
telling me is
wasn't
that she was the most useful tool for the Russian propaganda operation. That's what you're telling me.
she was the most useful tool, the least utilized,
And the
and the
least
least
expensive.
paid.
She was like FPV drone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think that's the problem. One of Lauren's problems. I don't know if she's ever coming back, just because obviously everything's been such a fucking nightmare.
Well, I
But
buried myself
I
under a rock after that. My God, you try to advertise yourself as an independent, like I'm the independent content creator. No one, tells me what to believe or pays me to believe what I want to believe. And
well,
then you find out you're
but
getting
here's
money, not disclosing, you're getting money from a foreign government. Even if you didn't know, that's your fault for not knowing. That's your fault for not asking
Lauren
questions.
Chen. Lauren Chen was one of her friends. So that cuts both ways to me. Okay, so that cuts to me
Connor, if
that
you ever come to me with $10,000, say, look, this is for your pro Ukraine content, I'm going to ask where the money's coming from.
you're a fucking idiot. Why wouldn't you just say, yes, sir, thank you? why, why wouldn't you say, I have bills to pay? Thank you very much, Connor. Like, what the fuck? So, anyways, maybe I just have less scruples than you do. I also have a family. So, maybe that's why I'm more excited about money. But shit, what was I going to say? So here's the thing, though. And I think this is like a mild sweep, like a mild defense for Lauren. But as far as I can tell from hanging out with her, one of her main problems is that she's a believer. That's one of her main problems. Is everybody else is grifting. Everybody else is, they're being hyperbolic. They're saying whatever in order to get attention. And I'm sure she says some shit to get attention. But if you talk to her about dissident right wing philosophy, if you talk to her about mass migration, if you talk to her about Islam, if you talk to her about Russia, if you talk to her about all these geopol shit, she's not some facade that falls apart the second you start like picking at the thing. She might give you a rhetorical answer. Like I'll tell you, she absolutely like tries to like angle the statement to the maximal effect of the audience. But underneath it, if you have a conversation with her, she does have like a internally coherent worldview that backs up the bullshit that she says.
Hmm. Well, she's a believer. She's a believer of the bullshit. But you know what?
Well,
At least
no,
you
but
believe in
that's
something. That
I mean, honestly, it was almost refreshing to a certain degree compared to some people who don't believe in anything and they're basically just showmen, you know?
Hmm. That
And they
story
also don't
about
care
the
about the ideology. They only care about clout.
that's true. That's true. I think you're actually 2 minutes over your time, so I want to make sure you can go to bed, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Wife's taking care of the kids, so I'm okay in that regard, but I do have shit that I need to do before I have post-recorded editing that I need to do, but I wanted to make sure that I went and talked to my good friend Dylan Burns before I did any of that
Yeah,
stuff.
you needed to come here and tell me that don't worry, Dylan, you have a pass to use all the slurs against all the veterans that you want.
Go for it, man. I'll back you up. Like honestly, if you go after Fat Electrician or Sean Ryan or I'm trying to think of who else, but if you go after any of those big guys and they get into a debate, I'm basically going to back. And then also one of the things that I said earlier that I'm going to repeat now, you should flex your war correspondent bona fides, man. There are shitloads of war on terror veterans who, like me, spent 99% of their time on a FOB, a forward operating base. They might have gotten shelled. They might not have even gotten shelled at all. And so their war experience is effectively deploying to a hostile country, but never seeing any action. Whereas if you have been shelled multiple times, I remember from the mortar video, you had a friend who took some shrapnel to the fucking guts.
Yeah,
I don't know what other hardcore
yeah, John Jones, good man. He's a fucking elderly British expat. That dude came back.
Right. Right.
He's
So
great.
one of your boys took shrapnel to the guts in an operation that you were participating in, right? And then
I
same
was
thing with
actually
the
supposed to be sitting right next to him where the mortar fell, and the boat. They were just,
yeah.
oh, at the last second, like, Dylan, actually, we don't have enough space yet. Don't You're not supposed to be on the boat.
Right. So, dude, you were 60 seconds away, 2 minutes away from taking some shrapnel to the guts yourself. And then same thing with what was the other thing? Like dealing with Russian FPV drones, man. If you're driving around near the front lines of Ukraine and you're seeing inbound Russian artillery, inbound Russian missiles, inbound Russian drones, that's more hostile action than some veterans have seen. So I wouldn't sell yourself short in that regard. Now, do I think that you should like tell a Navy SEAL who deployed to Iraq and has like 50 kills to like you will fist fight him in the octagon?
No, I'm not gonna go debate
Nah.
Cotton Hill.
Right. But if they try to big dog you and they're like, "Oh, you don't know what it's like, man. You're just a civilian." Just be like, "Listen, bro, I'm not trying to brag. There's more hardcore people
You
than
know,
me.
the
But I've
problem
been in
is
Ukraine for a few years and I've
with
seen
my
some
last
crazy
debate
shit."
with Sparky, this was brought up unprompted too. We were just debating like terms of engagement and like et cetera, et cetera. And out of nowhere, it's like, well, Dylan, if you believe it so much, pick up a rifle. If I say like I have all the experience, the next thing will be pick up a gun. But my response always to that is like, I don't know. I think only being able to take pictures doesn't necessarily, like, hell, I don't have a weapon to defend myself, motherfucker. I don't know if you would do that. If you go to any of these places and say, here's like a roll of
Yeah,
film, motherfucker.
dude,
Here's a roll of film to defend yourself with.
I wouldn't take that in my opinion, I wouldn't take that as a valid argument because like what the fuck does that have to do with anything? There's plenty of people who pick up a rifle, quote unquote, and they never fire it in anger. That adds no level of experience, insight, geopolitical understanding, historical understanding, psychological analysis of the dynamics of conflict, physiological understanding of what happens to people in combat. Picking up a rifle, it might add a degree to the point that you can understand the psychology of an infantryman a little bit better. But that if that's not relevant to what you're specifically talking about, then I don't think that I would almost view somebody saying, "Oh, Dylan, you just deployed to the front lines of Ukraine and you just saw some FPV drones and you just got artillery striked a few times and your friend almost died once. Well, you should pick up a gun." I would view that as them having no other argument besides like a personal quibble.
Yeah, I mean that's how I view it too. It's just very strange because like if I could carry a rifle, god damn it, I would be carrying around something because like I have like the tattoos on my back that they will carve out of my skin. So I think I would rather not.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I would ask Ukrainian armed forces if you could get a fucking pistol. That's what I would do.
I
So
remember
I don't know
the
how they.
current Polish foreign minister. Actually, he was a journalist in Afghanistan, and there's so many pictures of him in the Afghan garb with like the traditional hat, and he's got like an AK slung over his back, just walking around. And yeah,
That's based.
yeah, yeah.
Dude, I mean, I would carry a pistol because, like, I'm not saying that you're going to be able to get access to a pistol, or it wouldn't cause more problems than it's worth.
I
It would
might have,
probably cause more problems
I
than
don't
it's worth.
know because like I might have already shot somebody if I had a pistol, and that wouldn't have been. I don't know if I told you that time I almost got executed.
Yeah, wasn't there the fucking dude who like fucking detained you or whatever on the side of the road with
Yeah, he tried
a
to
like it
drive
was
us
like a
all to the.
Ukrainian soldier?
Yeah, I can tell you the story again, then we can wrap up. If you
Sure.
So me and Bogdan, who's my fixer, we're driving back from the front. We're in the city called Kramatorsk, a city in Donetsk. It's like is the last, like, it was one of two big cities, the Russians, like the biggest cities that they haven't taken, right? And we go back to Kramatorsk. All the lights are out because it's past curfew, but we have press military identification, meaning we have military IDs that mean we can be out past curfew. And if anybody question us, we can like show them, and they kind of have to just let us go. They can question, they can try to like be like, let me check the numbers, and they can hold us for a bit, but they have to let us go. And so we're driving back, and we get to this intersection where again all the lights are out, so all the traffic lights are not working. And so we come to this intersection. This guy comes over on the side, and we come to the intersection, and we look like we're about to crash. And we both stop like here, no collision, and we're like, oh shit, okay. And then we drive around, and we kind of go on our way across this bridge. This dude turns around, comes up behind us, then screeches in front of us, like right in front of us, and hits the brake, tries to brake check us, which of course makes us stop. and we're trying to figure out what's going on. I immediately think like, okay, is this like a random check by, Ukrainian guards to make sure there's no like spies moving around or some stuff? And then this dude walks out, shaved head, big beard, pixel camo, head to toe, comes to the side of our car, pulls out a pistol, cocks it, and starts threatening to execute both of us on the side of the road. Shoot us both in the head and just fucking like leave us there. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Now, all I have is a knife, right? Because it's what I can have. I don't even know if it's on the legal like blade length thing because they have like blade length restrict fucking because Europe, whatever. And I have that in my pocket. And so I can't do anything, but as a defense mechanism, I just put my hand on my pocket, just to remind myself I have a knife. It's not like I got odds are I'm sitting
Dude,
down in the car. He's just gonna shoot
a
me. It doesn't mean
bad
anything.
plan. I'm going to interject real quick. A bad plan is better than no plan.
Yeah. That was at least my idea. I thought like maybe I could, because he's standing next to the car, maybe I can just jolt out or something. I don't want to do, but I'm running through my head like, I don't got no gun.
What
I
can
don't
I
got no
do?
gun. What can I do? And eventually demands my fixer gets out of the car. He gets out of the car. He's like, has his fucking hands up. I'm trying to figure out, should I get out of the car? I don't like the idea of my fixer going out there by himself. I don't like, but I just kind of let him handle the situation because he can speak the language. And if I come out and say, Amerikansky, you Peter, fuck, like it's not gonna, he's much better at the escalating than I am, right?
Yeah, that might result in some bullets flying for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. But so anyway, he goes up to the side of his car and he speaks in the car to something. And then he comes back, the dude screeches his tires off, and I kick myself every day for not taking out my phone, taking a picture of what the fucking license plate was. But I was just in the moment, you don't really think about
Yeah.
that, right? Anyway, comes back to the car. The dude made Bogdan come to his car and apologize to his mother for almost getting them into a car crash. And I'm thinking like, why is his mom this close to the front driving out in the middle of the night with this dude?
Wait,
And
the dude went to go pick up his mom?
but this is the kicker. That's what I first thought because that's what Bogdan told me. No, he was distracted driving on his phone and almost crashed into us. That's why we almost collided because the dude was on his phone
Yeah.
distracted, got angry at us because he almost crashed into us and then threatened to execute us over it. That
Yeah.
is the problem of mobilizing everyone and then having very little psychological resources.
Yeah, dude. No, obviously it's good that, you didn't have to do anything crazy to that guy. It's obviously good that he didn't do anything crazy to you. But I'll tell you, I'll share this with you because I had to decompress from my military service, and obviously I had to decompress from law enforcement service. And when I was done with law enforcement, I told a shrink, I was like, I was having problems in public because I was so used to having a taser, pepper spray, gun, radio. I was so used to all that stuff. And effectively with law enforcement, what it kind of teaches you is that something can pop off at any moment. 99% of shit happens when everything is chill. Everything's chill. And then suddenly nothing is fucking chill. And so when you're walking around in chill environments after you've been in conflicted environments for a long time, it can psychologically fuck with you because you're basically waiting for the foot to fall.
Oh
That's what
yeah.
you're waiting for.
That,
And
that my
so,
house burning now fucked me up so bad because I was just like getting adjusted and then I hear two explosions in my house. And then
yeah, was
oh
that
my
like a
God.
gas stove thing or what was that?
Two electrical e-bike scooter batteries that my brother is super into.
Fuck. That
Yeah.
sucks. The did insurance just sorry, I'm not trying to get into nitty gritty, but did insurance cover any of that?
They would, but and I haven't said this on stream because I don't fish for sympathy and I've been dealing with it enough personally. But a month after the house burned down, I had to bury the man who raised me, and
Yeah.
his name was on the building, so they have to like do all the paperwork. It delays the process because of like legal holdings of who owns what or whatever. Because it's like owned, when a house is like not owned by one person, owned like by
Yeah,
4 or 5
it's
people.
in a trust.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, or maybe an estate is a better way to say it. So they have to like liquidate the asset, put it into the estate, and then distribute it to the people if there's a will, or if there's not a will, they have to figure out how the asset is going to get distributed. So I understand that.
Yeah.
But getting back to the little PTSD thing. Sorry that you had a little PTSD flashback and your house burned down. The I
Happens.
was talking to a therapist. Yeah, it happens. So I was talking to a therapist and I was saying like, hey, like I'm having some issues in public where I'm just like, I'm always paranoid. I'm always waiting for the other foot to fall. Like, what do I do? And she's like, well, do you carry? And I was like, yeah, sometimes, I got a concealed permit, this, that, the other. But when I don't have it, sometimes I can't take it to certain places. Like there's public venues that bar concealed carry, and they also search you when you go, right?
Mhm.
Disney, Dr. Phillips Center, those kinds of places. And she was like, okay, well, formulate a plan in your mind. And even if that plan sucks, oftentimes just the concept of forming a plan can be psychologically alleviating. And so what I realized is my plan basically, if I get caught not carrying and like a mass shooter or like a schizo starts trying to murder everyone, then I'm going to run up and I'm going to try to knock that person to the ground. And then I'm going to try to pull their like eyeballs out of their skull. Now, is that a good plan? No, it's a terrible plan. If a guy has an AK-47 or an AR-15 or even a pistol or even a knife, that's not a good plan. But does it give me some psychological relief to just kind of have in the back of my mind, if something crazy pops off and somebody's trying to kill everybody, I'm just going to charge them and do what I can do? Yes. And so that actually helped me out psychologically. It's a bad plan, but it's still a plan. So I hope that your knife scenario gives you some psychological relief where,
It felt me. It made me feel 1% less disempowered. I think
yeah, because like it's a bad plan. It's a terrible plan. You're probably going to die. But could you do something? And the answer is yes.
that's true. This reminds me of a lot of times when I'm driving around in these cars, like going into Pocroffs, I was in the back of the pickup. And if you're in the back of the pickup, some people say it's the best place to be because you could jump out quickly. I would say it feels like the worst place to be. I gotta say,
Yeah, because you
uh,
feel naked.
you feel naked, and also you feel a responsibility because you have more visual access through your eyes than everybody else in the vehicle because you could see everything. And so what I would
Yeah, you
do is
can't be playing Candy Crush.
can't be yeah, I can't be playing like Angry Birds or whatever. And so what I would do is I would just concentrate on constantly scanning the sky and thinking about what could I most quickly leap off of if I had to get out. And that was better than when on the ride out I was in the middle and it's the worst, it's the longest position to get out. Some people say it's the worst position. Which I don't know if it's the worst position, but it definitely is the one that's the hardest and like the slowest to get out of. I felt a lot more disempowered and I was thinking much more about the burning buildings didn't help, but I felt a lot more like vulnerable in some way because I didn't feel like there was really much I could do.
Oh, dude, you would. I hate to say this, but you probably already realized it before I say it. I don't think your chat would necessarily realize it, but the reason why it would quote unquote be the better place to be is because if a grenade hits the side of the vehicle, it has to go through like the soft shell and another person before it
Yeah,
gets to
I
you.
thought about
So
that already at the start of the ride when I got in the middle position. I was like, "Is this the worst place to be?" And I thought, "But if they hit the side of it, then I think
then it
Steve's
might slow
going."
down the shrapnel.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
might slow down the shrapnel. So, dude, that's still like a horrifying thought. And then, of course, like with the feeling of disempowerment, that can obviously like it can spike your adrenaline super hard. And then also the other thing, the position of disadvantage, kind of like you're saying, is trying to get out. And so, if the vehicle's on fire, or if there's additional shrapnel, or if there's more threats coming in, or if there's bullets, then of course that's going to send you into a tailspin. So the only thing that I would say is, this was actually something that I learned when I was law enforcement too. Naming the emotion that you're experiencing can also take like a hint of the power of the emotion off. And so if I was rolling to a call that was particularly intense, beating, stabbing, shooting, or whatever, then I would be like, okay, what am I feeling? And it would be like anxiety and anger. And just the thought of saying the words out loud, anxiety and anger, it didn't change the way I felt, but it took a little bit of the edge off as far as like the overwhelming nature of the emotion. And so
You're
same
kind
way,
of
if you're stuck in the
processing what's
truck,
happening, you know?
right? Instead of being like a caged animal just subject to your adrenaline and your emotions. And so I would say the same thing. If you feel stuck, in the back of a truck and you're kind of feeling a little panicky or whatever, then it might help to just say out loud, like not out loud, but say it in your brain. Just be like, the reason why I'm anxious is because I'm stuck in
I
the
love
middle.
the idea of we're all driving the position. I just yell, scared.
Anxious,
Piss self.
angry, scared. Dude, that would be pretty funny. Like if you guys just were screaming all your emotions randomly throughout the
Scared,
battle. Yeah.
terrified, anxiety, sad, horny.
Horny? Yeah, man.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't want to keep
So
it. I've already kept you 20 minutes past the thing. So
nah, it's fine. It's fine. Fine. I love you like a brother, and I want you to do good. So we don't talk enough. So I wanna spend some time. So I appreciate you, but I will dip out because, like I said, I do got other shit I got to do before I hang out. But do you mind if I actually shout myself out real quick?
sure, shout out your channel and shout out another channel for veterans of some sort. I heard.
Yeah. So what I'm doing, so Counterpoints 40K is my Warhammer channel. Still doing quite well. I actually remember announcing in April of it was like May of 2022 on the Hippy Dippy. I said, I guess I'm a Warhammer YouTuber now. And I said that, and Dylan was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Well, it's been 3 years and I'm still a Warhammer YouTuber. So that's still happening. Counterpoints 40K, broke 100K, subs. We're getting 500,000 to 1 million views every single month. It's okay revenue. It's a good time. So if you like Warhammer, check that out. What I'm also doing though is I'm going live on Counterpoints, just Counterpoints, which is a politics channel, and I go live on that from
Oh, and
Tuesdays
who edits for that,
9:30.
by the way?
Danabo.
Hmm.
Danabo is editing for that.
Yes, yes.
So, but from 9:30 to 2:30, 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., I'm live on Counterpoints on Tuesdays. The other days, Monday through Friday, I'm live on something called Valor Media Network, VALOR, Media Common Spelling Network Common Spelling. It's actually an offshoot of Midas. It's a bunch of veterans and first responders who get together. They make all sorts of like self-improvement content, but I'm the schizophrenic alt media streamer. And so that's really what I do is I just check out like alt media debates, Destiny debates, Hassan Ethan Klein drama, all that kind of stuff. I mix in the news and geopolitical stuff every now and then. But if you're into the YouTube and Twitch scene, then you're going to be into that as well. And I do, if you'll indulge me a little bit more of ranting, I basically break in what I think are pretty good geopolitical analyses in the middle of dramas. I use the Ethan Hassan, drama as a vehicle to actually talk about the politics that's going on that they're referring to in the drama. So if you like Dylan Burns and if you
Are
like
you
his
allowed to do
geopolitical
that?
analyses, am I allowed to inject serious things into the drama? Yes. Yeah, and that's what I do. but
Wonder why no one's
but
done
yeah,
that
if
yet.
you if you like Dylan, obviously we have different politics, but I still like to think that we care about history
Yeah, like
and
Connor's
warfare
like, he's
similarly.
conservative, he hates the gays, we're a little different, but we're all get
I
along.
make exceptions for Dylan.
Yeah, yeah. He says I'm allowed to take it.
Yeah. What? No, you're allowed to give it. You're never allowed to take
Am I
it.
not allowed to take it?
No, you can't be a bottom.
Oh,
Bottom
okay.
is the weakest position of gay. What the fuck?
I thought the switch position gave you the most negotiating power.
Well, it does, but at the same time, like, no, Dylan, you're supposed to be a top. What the fuck?
Okay, then I'm a top.
All right, I'm joking. I'm fucking around. But anyways, so yeah, so if you like this conversation, type in Valor Media Network common spelling into your YouTube search bar. You'll find me there 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Monday through Friday EST. And then also if you like Warhammer, check out Counterpoints 40K. And if you want to catch the VODs because you can't catch me live, then check out the Counterpoints channel. So yeah, that's it, brother.
Okay. You have a good one, man. It's nice to
All
talk to
right.
you again,
Love.
man. And next
Yep.
time let's make it shorter. I mean, not the talk, but the shorter the time is between us talking.
Sure. All right. Love you like a brother, man. Take care of yourself.
Love you too. You too, man. Bye bye. Stay safe. If Connor bottomed, he'd know how tough it is. He would know that only true brave warriors could. He would know. He would know.